Welcome to the techvalley.net user group for April 2022. Our session tonight is barcode and QR code scanning in Xamarin.Forms. Our speaker is Auri Rahimzadeh, Director of Software Engineering for Klipsch. We're always looking for speakers for TVUG. If you'd like to do a presentation, please reach out to us at meetup.com/techvalley.net-user-group. TVUG is sponsored in part by the .NETFoundation.org. Looking for other user groups to attend? Please visit meetup.com/.net-virtual-user-group.
Well, hello, welcome. I'm going to go and start sharing my screen. Let's see, do I have everything going? There we go. I use Teams every day. I should be able to figure this out. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Your screen is up.
Yay. Thanks, Chris. All right. Hi, I'm Auri Rahimzadeh. I'm the Director of Software Engineering at Klipsch. We're an audio speaker manufacturer based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Global company. Lots of fun. Tonight we're going to talk about barcode and QR code scanning. QR codes are just another flavor of barcode. We'll get into that. And specifically, doing this in Xamarin. Let's see if I can make sure this works okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, I can make PowerPoint do PowerPointing. So the way I got into this, I've been playing around with barcodes a bit, just all my life with mobile apps, but I really had to do it in depth with COVID. So I live in the city of Fishers. We're around 100,000 people, one of the largest cities in Indiana, and we have our own health department. And back when COVID hit and testing was starting, so this was back in, spring of 2020. So just think about that. So it's 2022 now. And the state was ramping up their testing. And I got a phone call on a Friday from their technology lead for the city. And he's like, hey, we need to be able to run tests of people who might have COVID and track those tests. And we need to do this quickly. Like, we need to start Monday. Do you know anybody? I'm like, well, that sounds like a really fun project, and it would be great as a mobile app, because why not? A mobile app would be great. It's handheld. It's easy to update. And what's really cool about it, and I'll get into some more of the details, but long story short, on the technology side, the state wanted to use laptops with handheld scanners and printers. And I was arguing to the Fishers team, well, why wouldn't we just use a mobile app? Because the scanner is already built in, called a camera, and it's handheld. And anything we can do to keep technology out of the equation, meaning any technology that could break down, we should do that. So what we decided to do was use barcodes. And there's two components you had to put together. I'm gonna share. Let me share my screen real quick. Okay, bring up my other screen. There were two things that you had to put together. One was the patient, and the other was the test. So the patient gets they fill out a survey that decides whether they're flagged for possibly having COVID, and then there's a test that is where you remember this, they swabbed your nose. Fishers was one of the few places that didn't use the one that touched your brain. It just was a shallow swab to the front of your nose. So it was much less intrusive. It was just as effective. And as far as I know, I'm not a doctor, I'm a software engineer. And the way that we would tie those two together was creating two barcodes, one for the test and one for the survey. And then by scanning those two, we could tie the two together using a back-end API that was already being provided to us. So I'm like, this will be awesome for Xamarin. We'll get into all the technology that was used to build that. Xamarin made this a cinch, and I built the UWP, the Android, and the iOS version over the course of the weekend. I think I had it done overnight. That's how easy it was to set up the scanning software. So very cool. And of course, it's Xamarin, so cross-platform practically out of the box. We did have, I'll get into why we had two barcode formats, but we had a QR code and we had a code 39. But I'll get into that in a bit. But if you want to read more about how this all happened, you can always go to my blog and just look for the building a COVID patient scanning app in 24 hours. Cool thing about this, we were able to get people through the line in, I think, about 2 to 3 minutes. So per patient, 2 to 3 minutes from the time they pulled up, scanned the barcode for their, or got scanned in, got their test, and drove out. It was about 2 to 3 minutes. The state, using their weird setup, took about 20 minutes a patient because they had people in bunny suits with handheld barcode scanners, a web-based solution. So this is where, Xamarin's power really comes into focus. Not just the mobile app being, you've got this very powerful portable computer that can basically do anything. It just doesn't have a keyboard. And we were able to take advantage of that to get patients scanned faster than anyone else. So it's very cool. Read about it if you're interested. All right, back to my presentation. So, talked about the barcode app. Let's see if I can make this go again. I guess I got to click it. There we go. Yay. Hopefully my little Teams thing isn't getting in the way. Cool. So what is a barcode? Right? I mean, barcodes are, when did they show up? I was born in the 70s. I don't think I've ever not had barcodes available to me. As long as I was a kid, I was born in 1975, so based on the history, that would be true. But what's crazy about it is a barcode was originally a printed version of Morse code. It's just Morse code extended to thick and thin bars. And unlike what we're used to today, they were circular. So get this, patented in 1951. Just like LEDs. You use LEDs all the time now. Your car comes with high lumen LEDs. LEDs are from the 50s, and so are barcodes. But even though it's a cool idea, they really didn't get mass usage until the killer app came out. And that was back when grocery stores decided to use this to make it easier to categorize and scan groceries. So in the meantime, they were used on trains to identify trains as they would go by. So these massive readers. And I've got the names. It was Norman Joseph Woodland and Bernard Silver. They're the guys who created it. But what you use and see every single day now was by George Laurer. And he came up with that design that you're so used to, which is the vertical bars. Now, barcodes can be 1D or 2D. So what you're seeing here, the UPC code that you know and love, is a 1D code. But then QR codes are 2D. I'm sure there's maybe a 3D version somewhere, but it's probably called something else. and your camera probably wouldn't have a good time trying to read it. Now, in the time of barcodes becoming popular, starting in the 70s, I'm sure some might have been created before then, but when it became popular, all the different variations started coming out. And I've got the list of them here. I'm not going to read everything, but data matrix, Codabar, code 39, which is very popular, and then all the way to QR codes. And interestingly enough, when I was writing this, I was talking with a friend of mine about QR codes, and he was explaining to me that QR codes, 30% of the data in a QR code is redundant. And the point of it is that you should be able to mess up the QR code and still be able to scan it. Kind of like how when you have a, I don't have my pen for my Surface that's in my bag downstairs. I would draw over this. There's a long QR code, these all being 1D, they could get marred in some way and they would still be readable because you have all that extra, it's kind of redundant, right? You don't really need an inch long barcode. But if you're shipping something and there's a label and it gets torn, then that redundancy becomes very important. So consider that if you're using a barcode on a product, what happens if that label or application of that barcode gets damaged? So how do you generate a barcode? Back in the day, it used to be very expensive. I remember this is in the early 2000s. It was in the late 2000s. I wrote an Android app before I was really using Xamarin, and back when Xamarin cost money. I wrote an app called Golden Ticket, and these days you do something very similar with like Apple Wallet and Samsung Pay. They have their membership card feature where you can track all of your memberships. You just bring it up on your screen, and the reader at the store or what have you, or at the gym, reads your barcode or QR code and lets you in. Well, I did something similar to that back in 2007, 2009, something around there. And in order to generate the barcode, there really were no free libraries to do it, at least none that I knew of. So I hosted on a server a barcode generating service, and I think I paid $1,000 to get the software. It was not cheap. And I'm trying to remember who they were. I think it was Barcode Inc. And they just had a Windows, or it wasn't a Windows plugin, it was an IIS plugin. So anyone who's old school or knows IIS, back in the day, when we weren't cloud everything, I had to install a CGI gateway that was exposed through IIS and then call it in order to get my barcodes. These days, though, thankfully, it's all free. So if you want to generate a barcode, there's a lot of ways that you can do it. Code 39, which is what we used, it's free font. You can go get it. But there's a lot of other barcode-centric fonts. There really isn't one for the QR code because a QR code is not a font. It's not just a set. You can just start typing and create a barcode. You have to generate a barcode using an algorithm. But that's okay too, because QR codes are also free to generate. So you can use a font if you need to use it on your computer, such as you're printing out labels. You can generate them online. There are services that do that, one-offs or just an API that'll print them out for you. Syncfusion, if you're familiar with Syncfusion and their awesome suite of free tools, they have SF barcode. So it's Syncfusion barcode, and it will generate barcodes on the fly for you in practically every format, including QR code. A note about Syncfusion: if you have not checked out Syncfusion, you absolutely should. And they have, similar like Telerik and, well, which is now Progress and Infragistics and so forth. They have a suite of components. They cover Blazor, ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, and of course Xamarin.Forms, Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms. And the cool thing about Syncfusion is as long as you're making less than $1 million with your app, all of their software is free. And I think that's the right price. And it tends to be really good. You don't get cheated out of support. They're awesome about sending you code examples and responding to you, even with the free stuff. And if you haven't tried them, I can't recommend them more highly than what I am now. But they're great. Now there's gotchas. So when you generate a barcode, the fonts and even some of the generators don't take everything into account. So you need to understand, just like copying and pasting out of Stack Overflow, how the particular format works. For example, when we were testing the COVID app, we printed out all of these labels. And when I would go and just scan like a sample code 39 that I grabbed off the internet, it would work. But when we used the font that we just generated with labels, it wouldn't work. What's the difference? So we finally figured out you have to begin and end code 39 with an asterisk character. Otherwise, it's not a valid barcode. I'm trying to remember how we figured it out. Like when we were testing it, I'm like, hey, what's the difference between these codes and the ones that don't work? And we finally noticed the ones that worked had the asterisk surrounding, and the ones that didn't have them. I'm like, I wonder if that's a thing. And now we've learned. So sharing that little bit of knowledge. So if you start using code 39 or any of these, make sure you understand the format and don't simply start using stuff. So once you've generated the barcode, how do you read it? And thankfully, and this originally started with Google, there's this very cool library called Zebra Crossing. It looks like Zing or ZXing, but really it's Zebra Crossing. And it's free. You just install it through NuGet, do a little bit of initialization, and you're basically all set to go. So you install these two libraries, the mobile and the mobile forms versions of Zebra Crossing, assuming you're using Xamarin.Forms. And note that it's Apache 2.0, so you don't have to go give all your IP back. It's available for Android, iOS, macOS, UWP. And Zebra Crossing has been ported to a ton of different platforms. So if you get used to Zebra Crossing for barcode scanning, you'll be able to write a native Android app, a native iOS app, use Swift or Objective-C or Kotlin or whatever. If you start going in native apps, I don't know if there's a web port of it, but I think generally that's going to be client facing. But who knows? Maybe React Native has a Zebra Crossing port. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. And you add that, and you're basically set. What will really get you, and this is true of practically all mobile development, but I think sometimes we're lazy about it, is permissions. Permissions are huge. So you need to grant the camera permission because you're using a camera to scan. But you shouldn't just prompt for the camera permission and then just assume that they granted it. So make sure that you validate granted permissions always. On Android, you get a nice big crash. And we don't want big crashes. I think the number of crashes in the past 2 years I could count. Other than there were some exceptions, but not crashes, and that's because a service provider's API went down. It wasn't my app, thankfully. But I think outside of testing, just personally testing, I think there were less than 20 crashes in 2 years. And the first few of them were because they onboarded a new device and they didn't grant the camera permission. So I added better error handling around that. Now, if you've used, if you're a Xamarin developer, I'm assuming that most of you are, especially, I imagine you're also Xamarin.Forms developers. Go use Xamarin Essentials. If you're not using that, which I can't imagine you're not, it takes care of everything for you. It's so easy to use, and now I think that's being effectively integrated into Maui. Stop me if I'm wrong about that, Chris, but I think a lot of that's being integrated in.
It's coming across. Yeah, it's just going to be called Maui Essentials.
Yeah, it's effectively going to be built in. I mean, for at least the past year, Xamarin Essentials has been included in all the templates anyway. I think it might even been for the last 2 years. Just the default template includes Xamarin Essentials because you'd simply use it all the time. Now, the initialization, very simple. If you guys want any examples of that, I'm happy to show it to you. And we'll go through a couple examples. One is going to be the bare bones sample. Just how would you start? How would you scan a barcode? The second is how I customized it in the COVID scanning app. So let's get started on that. So it's practically a one-liner. This is how simple this is, and I just copy and pasted this as a screenshot out of the GitHub repo because there's no reason to bring this into Visual Studio. But you initialize it, you new up a scanner instance, and then you go get the scan results. How easy is that? Now, to be fair, this example, as I wrote on the slide, is fraught with peril. First of all, there's no permissions check. That's a big no-no. Second, you're scanning everything. So you don't care what you're scanning, you're just scanning. I find that to not be a good idea. I mean, unless you're trying to build a barcode scanning app, like that's all it does is barcode scanning. There's a lot of those on the market, so I don't know why you'd build it. But who knows? I mean, for just example code and playing around, I get it. But from a uniqueness standpoint, not so much. But barcode scanning's uses obviously are well understood. I just think you should target it better. That helps it figure out what it's finding faster and make sure that you get what you're expecting. So that goes into my more advanced reading example. Now, I'm going to get back to this one just for a moment. When you kick this off, when you kick off scan right there, you don't have to do any design. It will bring up the screen that you're basically used to, which is a screen comes up with effectively crosshairs. I don't remember exactly what it looks like, but I'll see if I can get it launched here in a bit. It takes care of all of this for you. So the scanning screen itself, it will take care of it for you. And you can embed it in a form. So if you want to embed it in your Xamarin.Forms screen, or your Xamarin.Forms form in your XAML, for example, you can do that. I didn't. I think if you're scanning, but your mileage may vary, and zebra crossing is very flexible. I'll get into that. So what's a more advanced reading example? So these are snapshots from the COVID app. And if you take a look, when they tap the scan click or the scan kit button, I check, do we have camera permissions? If we don't have the camera permissions, I just return. That's it. I'm not even going to try. There's no point. It's going to crash. I'm guaranteed to get an exception if I can't access the camera. So always make sure in your mobile apps that you make sure permissions are legit. I also suggest that you have some utility functions because you're going to check permissions sometimes often. Keep those in a utility class just so you can use them anytime you like. Now, in this example, you can see we're setting some more options. Number one is I'm specifically saying I want to look for code 39. I want to support code 39 extended mode, and I want to use their try harder. I didn't have to use try harder, but I put it in there just in case. I think it analyzes it a little bit longer in a different way, probably something that uses more battery. Who cares? I mean, modern devices last almost all day anyway, so who cares? So why would I say only code 39? And the reason is when the customer comes, or when the patient comes up, and we need to scan their stuff, there's two things we need to scan, like I said. One is their patient ID. The other is the test kit that needs to be associated with that patient. If those were both the same format, it's possible that the technician, who is not technically savvy, scans the wrong thing and puts it in the wrong field. So we explicitly defined that the test kit would be a code 39 barcode, and the patient survey ID, the patient ID, would be a QR code. You couldn't look at those two things and mess them up. But even if you did, like you had their scanning or their QR code and the for their patient ID, and you had the kit ID code 39 sitting on the same table, you could move the app over that while scanning mode was on, and it would only scan the right thing. And that was the key. And our telemetry, I had a bunch of telemetry in the app, bore that out, that we had a very high success rate in getting things scanned the first time. Now, all I did, very similar to the example that you already saw, I said create a new zebra crossing scanner page with those options that I just specified. And then when it's done, I want you to go hit this function. And then I push the scanning page async. I mean, that's what we do these days, right? Async and await. Yay. Then when I get the result back, I pop it on async. All right, pardon me. I pop it in from the main thread. This is super important. It's happened more in the past 2 years, but you need to be careful, especially on Android, that certain functions require that you kick them off from the main thread. Otherwise, you'll get an exception. I've had this issue also in iOS where it says, hey, this needs to be called from the main thread. Well, it's not a big deal for me to go do that. I just use device.begin invoke on main thread, and I take care of it. Pretty simple. And then I call on scan kit complete. This is just, I already have the data at this time. So I call on scan kit complete. I check to make sure that I got some data back, and I make sure that it's in the right barcode format. So note that I get the data back. And yes, I already specified this here, but I'm paranoid. So I still follow, all right, let's make sure code 39 is supported, or is the format that I'm supporting. This way I can extend it anytime I like. And I pass a empty value if it's not. Otherwise, I send the text. But I think we practically never got an empty value. Any questions so far? Nope. Okay. So what if you want to customize this? You may want to implement it any number of ways. Well, the beauty of zebra crossing, it's open source and it's very customizable. So you can do custom overlays that will require platform-specific views. The barcode scanning engine, you don't have to use it the way I did, which is where I pushed a zebra crossing scanner page and just let it do its work. And then it just, when it finds something, it returns back the result. You can actually manipulate the barcode scanning engine yourself. It's always available. I've got the notes about that here. Is get a new mobile barcode scanner. And then just hit start scanning. It's very simple. Now, like I've got written here, you're going to have to manage the event pipeline yourself. All that stuff is handled for you by the zebra crossing scanner page. But if you want to control it a different way, then that's up to you. The beauty of it, it's open source. So if you want to go pull it down and customize it the way you like, you can. I did see some conversation about using the iOS AV capture session engine. I'm not very familiar with that, but I did read that option is available if you want to use it, but the number of formats that are supported is limited. So you might get code 39 and QR code, but you might not get code 39 extended. I'm making up what that list is, but just for illustrative purposes, you're going to be limited in the formats that are supported. So a few resources that'll help you here. If you want to get the free fonts, just go to Barcodes Inc. I think they're the same people that used to charge me a lot of money. Now a bunch of free stuff. So just whack free barcode font. And then Syncfusion, of course, they have a QR code and barcode generator. Just go grab Syncfusion. That, by the way, they have the same thing for ASP.NET. So if you want to add a QR code or barcode generation to a website as a service for your customers, you can do it. You can also get the PDF barcode scanner. It'll find barcodes and PDFs for you. It's kind of crazy, all this stuff that you can get for free now. I gave you a link here to the zebra crossing GitHub. Super simple. GitHub.com/ just what's on the screen right here. And then, of course, there's a free code 39 generator for testing. So Barcodes Inc. is a great resource. They'll let you try a bunch of different barcodes to generate. So as you build out your app, I cannot stress enough that you should make sure that it works with these online generators. And then when you generate it in your app, make sure you fully understand that format, because what we originally did, thankfully we didn't waste much paper. We printed everything out on labels. And the reason for that is if we pre-printed the labels for the day, like 1,000 labels, well, A, we wouldn't run out of labels, and B, we didn't have to worry about a printer breaking down. Because if you already have the labels, nothing can break down. It's just as long as people don't have broken fingers, we can put labels on kits. So that worked out really well because we basically took anything that could break out of the equation. We didn't have handheld scanners getting unplugged because they were plugged in through USB and the cable wasn't long enough, or someone tripped over it while they were in their bunny suit. We didn't have to worry about power bricks for laptops. We just had fully charged iPhones and iPads, and we were able to run all day with no problems. Great. Well, that's all I have about QR codes and barcodes and so forth. Do you have any questions? And thank you very much for having me.
If you'd like to come off the mic and ask a question, this would be a good time. Before they do that, the guy who did the Xamarin port, Reddit, Jonathan Dick, I met him back in 2013. The first mobile app I did was an iPad app that needed to do QR codes. So he and I went back and forth through emails. And then I met him at the Xamarin conference. And the first thing I did was I took him out to dinner for all the work he did on it.
Nice.
Now he works for Microsoft with Xamarin on the Android stuff.
They all do, don't they? Like now Matt Sokup is there.
Yeah.
I think practically everyone has ended up at Microsoft if they worked on Xamarin in the past.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, no, it's a really cool project.
Yeah, I love it. It's very cool seeing people port stuff and that it works. Exactly. It's just amazing.
Yeah, well, they stole a lot of stuff from all those open source projects. I did that with a open source serial port library for Android that was done in Java, and I just ported it over to C#, made it open source.
Yeah. Yeah, I did that with what was it, OpenCSV?
Yep.
I ported that. I called it OpenCSV Sharp. And that, there were a number of people using that. And then I think there was like one bug, but I fixed it. And for the most part, it worked. But now we have like, CSV? I don't know. I use a different library now because a much more advanced library came out, and I think it might have been faster than mine, but it worked really well for what I needed at the time. Right. I needed a CSV reader. And I'm like, oh, that looks cool. I'll just port that to C#. Oh, it's all in Java. Well, this will mainly be the same, and it wasn't all threaded and everything, but I just needed it for me, and I think that was my first open source project. Like, if anybody wants to take it, I'm not gonna make any money off of this.
Yeah, I was John Dick's guinea pig for part of the zebra crossing stuff because he was big. He was doing nothing but Android, and he had an iPhone, but I was doing an iPad, and the views are different. So basically, he was writing a lot of stuff to spec. I'm like going, well, this almost works, and then it almost works. But he was really good about fixing it, especially because he worked for a school district. He was doing this on his own time.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Now he works for Microsoft.
Now he works for Microsoft. Yeah, he went to Microsoft probably a year or two after that. So he's been at Microsoft for quite a while.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if anyone's seen it. Has anyone here seen Windows Subsystem for Android yet?
I love it.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
I was gonna show it off. I mean, really, the code is so simple. I didn't know if I really had to show anything beyond screenshots of code. It doesn't really, it's pretty self-explanatory. But I can launch the app with Windows Subsystem for Android. And it's been super cool. Although, so I've got our Klipsch Connect app, and I was hoping that I could run that, but they haven't abstracted the BLE yet. So the Bluetooth layer, and so I was bummed because you can run Klipsch Connect on an M1 Mac.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It just launches just fine. I was like, oh, cool! I'll be able to run Klipsch Connect, and just use WSA, and it's like you need to grant Bluetooth permissions, and I can't.
Yeah, and the other thing is if you need anything that involves Google Play services, they don't have that in there. You have to. I mean, there are ways of doing it, but not out of it doesn't come out of the box with it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a surprising. If you're doing anything with maps, well, you just lost Google Maps.
Details.
Minor details. There are ways around it.
I think
but
Ralph
it's
has
just
a question.
Yeah. Do we have a question?
Yeah, Ralph, do you have a question about that? And you're welcome. I'm looking at doing an Android app to scan barcodes and emulate a handheld scanner. So Zebra Crossing would be perfect for you.
No real question, but just the timing was just like, oh, this is interesting. I'm just looking at doing an app to emulate a device which we can't get hold of, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe if I just do it on a phone, I can get the job out the door. Yeah, so that's just still in evaluation, but yeah, it's kind of killing the whole project that we can't get those scanners.
Yeah,
and I'm also looking at fixing up a library that I have for drawing QR codes, because the library I've got doesn't work, or doesn't do GS1 support. It's like, oh, and so it's interesting that he's got that other library, which I also found, but the existing library is pretty well integrated in, and so at the moment I'm going down the path of I'll fix the library. So I'm having to get into the details of the library to change.
Just keep adding libraries. Just keep adding libraries. It's okay. Bits are free.
Yep.
I thought it would be funny when I thought it was bad, like if an app got to like a few megabytes in size, and now like I don't think people even bat an eye at the size of their apps unless it's like a game.
Yeah, because they at one point they did limit the size, and they just said, well, this doesn't work anymore, and we'll just whatever.
Yeah, well, we had to do that. Yeah, with iOS, there was you got capped at, I think it was like 50 or 100 megabytes.
Yep.
And you had to move it all to resources. And oh man, that was a pain. I'm glad I didn't have to write that code.
I did have a little
I remember them talking about it. What, Ralph?
Yeah, I do have a bit of a question with Xamarin and Maui. So, like, I'm looking at having an Android.
You're breaking up a bit,
Ralph,
just so you know.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Ralph. It's like we're losing every other word.
Or write your question in the chat just in case.
Fully related. Yeah.
Yeah, you're breaking up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could post your question in the chat, Ralph, we could probably answer it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been looking at that Maui stuff, Chris, and I mean, really, it's just the UI side, right? All the other Xamarin stuff, other than switching to what is it, .NET Android and .NET iOS, just instead of using Mono, having actual native Microsoft ports is great. As long as I target Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, generally it'll work. And then I just got to swap the UI. So
yeah, I mean, there's under the hood, there's quite a bit of change, especially because you no longer you don't have to write the custom renders. They have handlers now to make that a lot easier. You have the single project file, which is helpful. Then you can just add a target or remove a target, and
and they can they're going to help you transition. I think there's supposed to be a wizard eventually. They'll help you transition. So about that, Ralph, I think when it comes to the transition, I've spoken on Maui a number of times. I'd play around with it, but you're not stuck this year having a switch over to Xamarin or to Maui. Now, eventually, in order to write new stuff, yeah, you're going to have to move to Maui for the UI side, unless you're just going to stick with your just native apps. So Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, that itself isn't overall changing. The runtime that's used is changing, but they're just moving from mono, which I'm glad they're doing this, going from mono to something that's actually maintained by Microsoft and the community. Now, on the Maui side of things, that being UI centric, you get so many benefits. And if you're already code first or using XAML, there's no punishment for switching over to Maui. And I think they've got a lot of information. I have not tried porting a custom renderer. I'm not sure if those are 100% gone, but they probably are going to be. But the point is, you could transition relatively easily. And there's been a lot of conversation and blog articles about that. So the majority of your code should port over just fine. You're not even porting. You're just moving it over. So and there are full guides. I would still wait if you have a production app.
It's not production ready.
Yeah, if you have a production app, wait till it's fully released. And even then, because you're not under any pressure to move immediately, I would still wait a good 3 months, a good 90 days to let it soak into the market. You're going to have to deal with your CI/CD. So if you're using like App Center, I don't know that App Center is going to support it out the gate. So you got to make sure you don't have an issue there. I don't know if there'll be an issue with its device testing. I know we pretty religiously use App Center, even though we're not using Xamarin right now, not for the main app, although I'd like to go there. But we use App Center for all that CI/CD of native iOS and Android apps. And I'd go nuts if that stopped, just because I was trying to get to the latest, greatest thing. Let's help things go right. And let other people be the guinea pig.
You can do builds of Maui right now on GitHub. The GitHub workflows will support that. Release candidate 1 for Maui was today or yesterday. So look at general availability on Windows to be probably around the time of build. Right now on the Mac, it's held up, not so much for the Maui bits because it's compiling on everything, but the tooling for Visual Studio 2022. So you're probably not going to see you're not going to see everything fully released until the end of summer.
So keep that in mind, that it says that the key term here, if I was going to offer any advice, just like Chris is saying, it's a release candidate. It is not released.
Right. It's feature complete.
It's a fancy way of saying beta. Release candidate means we don't think this is beta anymore, but if it doesn't work, we're going to have a second release candidate. That's called being a beta tester.
Yep.
So, proceed with caution, play with it, learn, but keep in mind things may and probably will change. Like Chris was saying, it's feature complete, but that does not mean that how it rolls out is complete. So wait for it to be fully released. I'm sure there'll be plenty of announcements around it. And even then, I would still wait. Someone will find some stupid thing. But it has been in test for a couple of years. But keep in mind, they just finally finalized some of these things just recently, which means the latest stuff has not been tested as much. Now, to Don's question, hopefully that answers your question, Ralph. So this summer, I think this summer, by the end of the year, everything should be out.
I've seen the internal schedule, and I'm not allowed to say it. You're not off.
Yeah.
That's all I can say.
So you're probably okay waiting till the end of the year. So if you have people asking, should we move to Maui? When's that going to happen? End of the year is probably when you'll start your development. if that. It might even be spring of next year that you'll start your development. It may be released in around November, but you're safe to wait. Your stuff won't suddenly stop working. It's not like your license expired. Now, Don was asking a question, is there about speed differences between dedicated scanners versus phone scanners? So it was not an issue in our usage. Yes, you bring up the camera. It's not trigger ready. But we're also not putting people through a grocery line. So if you wanted to do something where the scanner was available all the time, you'd have to consider your use case. So if you need to scan all the time very, very, very quickly, the handheld scanner may be the better choice. It's
Can't beat a
certainly
laser.
But there's hardware and implementation details with that and cost. So if you're scanning one thing every few minutes or even 4 things a minute, the camera's fine. The camera comes up practically instantly these days, scans, and that's practically instant, and then you're done. So you could keep the scanner up all the time, and it will scan very quickly. It is very fast, but your use case may vary. So I would consider that. I would think ease of use, portability, speed, environment, and cost. Because those handheld scanners, my friend, are not cheap at all. I've bought those and they break down. Yeah, it's very expensive. Just one of them, I think, is they used to be a couple $100. Anyway.
And the other thing is with to speed up the scanning of the phone app is, as Auri showed, you can limit what barcodes can be read. If you know you're only going to be scanning QR code or you're only going to be scanning code 39, just tell it to scan that.
Right.
Because one of the things zebra crossing is trying to match every single type of barcode. So if you limit that, that will greatly speed up its processing time.
Yeah. And you saw that in my code example, Don. I specifically said scan for code 39. Because that's all I cared about. Now, when we were scanning QR codes, same thing. I said scan QR codes. And you can tell it to scan both. You can pass more than one type. But the cool thing about that is that it'll only return a result if it finds one in that format. So you'll never get a false positive. Whereas if you just tell it to scan everything and you have a sheet of barcodes, well, you may get the wrong one because your camera was focused on the wrong thing. And you're going to have users in the field using pieces of paper, trying to block things out. Don't do that to them. Care about your users.
Plus, today's phones are so fast. It's the processing power is there. When I used zebra crossing, that was in 2013 with like 2nd generation iPad, which was much slower than the ones that now.
Yeah.
There was you could see a performance boost by just limiting it to code 39.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nice having gobs and gobs of memory and processing power now, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you're welcome, Ralph. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. My email address is pretty simple. It's just auri@auri.net. So auri@auri.net. I'll put that in the chat. It's auri@auri.net. I'm on Twitter, but don't ping me on Twitter because I'm rarely monitoring it. LinkedIn is good. You can find me pretty easily on LinkedIn. That's pretty easy. Yeah, just hit me up if you have any questions. I'm happy to help you out.